Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for coming along to our interactive panel, Crafting Inclusive Futures in the Age of AI. So, as we all know, there's new tools that are transforming how we make and create in the industry. So it's important for us to take a moment to consider the ways in which we can see these tools impacting people, communities, and cultures in unexpected ways. How does AI depict us? Why does it struggle with underrepresented communities and minority groups? And how are brands responding to these questions? These are some of the themes that we'll unpack with our incredible panel during today's sessions. Before I introduce them, I'll introduce myself. So I'm Kevin Stanley Dowd. I've worked in the creative industries for the last 15 years, and I'm currently creative director at checkout.com. I also have a background in design research. My doctorate focused on political visual communication, and I've done some work in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space, led LGBT networks in previous organizations, and I guess I'm particularly interested in the spaces where design, inclusion, and innovation intersect. And now on to the wonderful panel. Sorry, I'm multitasking here, so give me a second. I'll kick off with Chris Kenna. So Chris Kenna is CEO North America of BA Diversity Media. He's also on the board of the Met Police as well as the VNA. His company of 170 people has 3 TV channels and 8 magazines. And interestingly, a large portion of the business operation is underpinned by AI. So we might give a little tiny round of applause for each of them, if that's all right. There we go. So, next up, Leila Fattar, a renowned brand builder and business innovator. Leila has over 2 decades of senior leadership experience.
Almost 3.
Oh, almost.
Next year.
Oh, okay, almost 3. 3 decades of senior leadership experience at the intersection of culture, creativity, and commerce. She's the founder of Platform 13 and is committed to authenticity and advocacy for inclusive representation throughout the advertising, marketing, and communications industries. She spearheaded approaches from the boardroom to the billboard that positions cultural relevance not only as a marketing nice-to-have, but also as a key business growth driver. Working previously in senior positions at Adidas and Diageo and through her own companies, her expertise has allowed her to read the cultural zeitgeist and translate it into compelling brand strategies that resonate. You can hear more about her work in her upcoming book, Culture-Led Brands, but you'll have to wait until early 2025 for that. But
30 years.
But hopefully we'll get some of those insights today.
Thanks.
So a little round of applause for Leila. Next up, we have Kalisha White. So Kalisha is currently Senior Brand and Activations Manager at Depop, a community-powered circular fashion marketplace where anyone can buy, sell, and discover desirable, affordable secondhand fashion. She's an award-winning marketeer and keynote speaker with several years' experience ideating and executing cultural strategies and campaigns. With a background in both agency and in-house, she creates culturally relevant work underpinned by consumer insights that meaningfully resonate with audiences. She brings a different perspective into the room and uses her life experience as a tool to broaden the cultural perspective of those who collaborate with her. Kalisha has delivered talks on culture and inclusive marketing at L'Oreal Group, London College of Fashion, Advertising Week Europe, Bima, Samsung, and more. So a little round of applause for Kalisha. Awesome. And finally, last but not least, introducing Laura Monterroso Daher, whose roots stretch from Spain to the West Indies, though she currently calls London home. Bringing over a decade of expertise in the music industry to the panel, she is the founder and driving force of Music Collective, a full-service music and sound agency rooted in culture. Their mission is to democratize access to media space for authentic talent from local communities. She has had collaborations with brands such as Bacardi, P&G, and Revlon, and has garnered industry recognition for her work, including the Music and Sound Award for Best Composition in Branding and the Transform Award for Best Use of Audio. She is also co-host on the Cultured podcast with Fouad Mohammed, where cultural nuances are celebrated and embraced, and which I would also recommend. So a little round of applause for Laura.
Thank you.
Great, so how will this work? It's an interactive panel. So I think it would be great to really have some interaction from you guys, the audience. We will be sharing visual examples and some case studies. We welcome your input throughout, so you don't need to wait for the Q&A at the end. If you do want to contribute to the conversation, just pop your hand in the air, and as soon as there's a gap, we'll come over and hear your perspective. And I will be asking you what your thoughts are throughout as well. And yeah, we will have the Q&A at the end if you want to save questions specifically for the panel. It could be useful to have a definition of generative AI just in case someone in the audience hasn't been exposed to Gen AI. I think that's unlikely, but just in case, generative artificial intelligence describes algorithms such as ChatGPT that can be used to create new content, including audio, code, imagery, text simulations, and videos. So that's just a little definition to get us going. So we're going to jump right in, and we're going to hear from our panel. So how are we seeing Gen AI used in our businesses or with our clients? I'm going to come to you first, Leila.
Thanks.
No problem.
I think you're right. I think it's defining what it is, because Gen AI means different things to different people. And what I'm finding with the brands that I work with, it's less about the output at this time, and it's more about how they're using it internally for productivity, efficiency, insights, and in the creative industry specifically, using it, and we use it as well, almost as a way to get ideas down and iterated versus an output. I'm not really sure about the output at the moment that I see, personally, for many reasons. Bias we'll talk about, copyright we'll talk about, but just in terms of, and I talk about this in the book, actually, you know, we're flying the plane as we're building it, basically. And so I think the difference this time is that the public are using it, whereas before you'd always have the industry trying new things, new techniques. This time the public are really driving it with ChatGPT and of course Netflix and all these places use AI already to be able to, you know, Spotify serving us our things that we might like. But I think from an industry point of view, and business point of view, for me, it's feeling at the moment more like a productivity tool versus an output medium. But you know, things are happening overnight. And I think once Sora comes out, it might be different. But at the moment, for me, it doesn't feel.
Interesting.
Feel where it needs to be in the output.
Yeah, and Chris, does that resonate with you, or?
As a company, we're totally different. We, mid last year, went full feet into it. We're a company of people that didn't really start in the industry. I myself was in the army, in the British Army, for most of my, from my teens into my late 20s. So I had a totally different sort of career and outlook, and AI especially has been used a lot in the military, so I was already used to it. It figures out the battlefield, it helps you with the game plan, it blocks jamming signals. That's all done with AI. So now our company, I would say mid last year, we gave a task to all the departments in all our offices. I'm based in New York, so we gave it to our New York office, we gave it to London, we gave it to France and Germany, and to Mumbai, and said, how could you make AI run your department so that you can do whatever job it is in the company you want to do, and you don't need to do any mundane tasks in your department? But
that's not different to what I just said. So, you just said you think you're doing it differently. That's exactly what I just said.
No.
It's a question. I'm just trying to be clear.
No, I was meaning we're doing it differently in the industry. So I'll get to the end and then it'll make more sense. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought. I've really lost my train of thought.
It's all right. I think thinking about the creative outputs of your company, do you see generative AI being used for image making or video content or script writing or?
Yeah. All right, let me get back on track. So we use AI. We've got 3 TV channels. We've got a black channel, a Hispanic channel, and an LGBT channel. Our channel broadcasts in 32 countries and in 27 languages. Now, that's a lot of creative. We have a different social media account for each country, for each channel, in each language. So that was a lot to create. We couldn't possibly do it as a company. Now AI does all that for us. Also, our channels are broadcast, because they're broadcast in different countries, the time zones are different, therefore the scheduling has to be different. So it used to be a massive team that all they did each day was get our content for 24 hours and then rejig that content for the different time zones and take out some content that doesn't work in that country. You can't show it, Muslim country, etc. And all of that. AI does all that now. So all of our channels, they broadcast 24 hours a day. And the scheduling of that channel is all done by AI. Like, no human schedules it now.
Yeah.
And even finding content as well. You know, like we've built a system called cultural intelligence that scans the internet, looks at YouTube, etc., looks at content, what's being engaged, what are people saying, what are people sharing, and then it will actually find that content, and then it will send a message to the content creator, and it will have the first steps of the conversation. We're really interested in your content. Would you be interested in our channel? They say, oh yeah, I'm interested. Tell me more about the channel. The AI answers it all. Sometimes up to the contract. Sometimes we have to jump in before the contract because AI is getting it wrong a little bit. And we've built in a lot of sort of gates to tell us when it's going off. Yeah. So that we can monitor it. But I would say, a big chunk of the main brunt of what we are as a media company is actually done by AI.
Yeah.
So that was what I was saying.
Yeah,
most companies are not doing that.
Yeah, totally. I hear that. It sounds like you've really built a lot of your operational efficiency and the outputs on AI's kind of capabilities. Laura, I'm interested to hear about the music industry. How is AI being used in the music industry?
Yeah, I think there is a big question, obviously, on copyright issues at the moment. So people are being careful in order to use these tools, specifically Gen AI. Because you don't know where the data is coming from. Is it coming from, uncopyrighted material and so on? But what I do see is, there's a lot of potential in a positive way, but also there's some things that AI can still not really do to the best of its ability. I see it more as a human enabler, so I completely agree with you, Leila. I think when it comes to productivity, saving time, giving more deliverables, it's there. When it comes to creativity, specifically, I would say even scoring tracks, and editing it to pictures specifically. If you want like a crescendo at a specific point, like AI is not there yet. And also what we do at Music Collective is like, how are we cultural relevant, with AI tools, creating like specific music from like local regions and so on. It's not there yet, in my opinion. So there's a big question on the copyright issues going back, and I think, I don't know if anyone heard, but recently the biggest labels have sued two of the most popular AI software tools, Suno and Udio. But then again, AI is always going to be here, so we have to adapt to it.
Yeah. It's very similar kind of issues with artwork that looks too close to the original artist or illustrator's work, or any maker or any creative output that over-indexes on the sample material that it's kind of building off, which I think is really, a consistent challenge across the creative industries. Kalisha, do you think that businesses have fully grappled with AI in their creative outputs?
I think it depends on what business you are. I think if you're ahead of the curve, then you're proactive and actively seeking ways that it can enhance productivity and efficiency, like Leila and Chris said. But I think most companies will be reactive, just because it's the nature of humans, really. Like when something becomes a problem is when we want to solve it. So, for example, at Depop, everyone thinks of Depop as a fashion platform, but it's a tech platform, and we use AI to safeguard, for example, but also working with other organizations, for example, like Trust, that's helping to revolutionize the way that people shop secondhand. So I think if you're an innovator brand, if you work in tech, potentially then you're at the forefront of it, but they've obviously proven different ones being in media, that, it depends on who's in the leadership roles, who's, guiding the conversations around AI, and whether or not you have visionaries and think leaders in your company that's really thinking about where this is going to go. So I think it just depends on what kind of business you are.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, jump in.
Can I add as well that we have a sort of motto that we can use AI to create, but it's never going to be creative in our company. So we can anyone in the company, they can use AI, they can come with us with an idea for how AI can create or reproduce, but just never expect it to be creative. Because, if we're making shows or if we're making pieces of content for a brand or whatever it might be, them shows are made from the director and the producers and the teams and their lived experience. It's a little bit like Slumdog Millionaire. He knew the answers to the millions from all these different points, from a child to life. That's how creative's made. Each bit, I'm a blackout gay guy, and, that's been in the army, that has 2 teenage, very gobby, expensive teenage kids. So, and all of them, all of that feeds into what creatively I make as a documentary filmmaker or as a drama filmmaker. So, yeah, I think AI, as long as we sort of remember it can create, it can do that, but it'll never be creative, because I truly believe that creativity needs a soul.
Exactly.
It needs a soul, and that's the one thing it won't have.
Yeah. I think we're unanimous on that last point in particular. I think that's really helpful to try and set the scene of how generative AI and AI is being used in businesses. Do we have any points from the audience at this stage that anyone would like to add about how they're seeing AI being used? No pressure? A little bit of pressure? No pressure? No? Okay. Yep. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I think consistent with a lot of our experiences of how it's being used, like in ideating or concepting. But when it comes to the craft that is is often required in the final output, I think that's where it doesn't really meet the standards that we'd expect in an output, or certainly that's been my experience. Yeah, fire away.
I think we have to be careful, though. Sorry, go ahead. Just back to your point. I think we have to be careful, all of us, that we understand where it's getting its information from. So that's where you can get to this really generic place, right? Because it's all scraping from the same place, unless it's inside a business. So I think that's also the thing to be careful of when thinking about the more public-facing AIs, whatever you want to call them, because it's all coming from the same place, which is actually what this entire thing is about, is where is the source material coming from in order to even do the visualization. And what I tend to do with visualization of storyboards or storytelling for my client campaigns is very much around trying to break that homogeneity that you see from the output. So you almost like go opposite and just see what happens from there, and then use that as inspiration to iterate from. So that could be a way to do it, because otherwise we're going to start getting, the same as Instagram nude color aesthetic, but for everything else, So I think break it and see what happens.
And you had a point, sir.
You have to.
Yeah.
That is part of your job too. And that's something that we do at Platform 13. And I was saying, as well. You know, it's about opening the gates, but it's really educating brands about what's right and what's wrong. It's absolutely something you've got to do. I tend to do that by just showing them examples of things as opposed to just trying to force the opinion. You know what I mean?
Also,
but please educate. Go, 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 go. You need to teach them.
yeah, I would say educate from the start, like from the beginning, and not wait until like the deliverables. And remember like your strategic work that you've done way before as well. Because I think the why behind and the reasoning and the purpose and what got you to create those assets, you know, that background would inform that a lot, and it'll make probably clients realize like, oh yeah, that's true. That's why we did it that way, you know? So yeah, I would say that.
I'd say one thing, because we've had that a few times actually, because there's a creative agency in our group as well, is we build a story about the making of the creative. So bring the client on that journey. Who are the creatives? What backgrounds do they come from? What are you actually supporting by allowing these creatives to work on the project, you know, and just enforcing that a little bit more than we might have done earlier. So we bring the stories of the creatives there, you know, and then that's where, you know, either it's going to work or they're heartless and they're going to say, no, keep using, you know, DALL-E or whatever it is that they rang it through on. But once you've got a story, once there's a story of the creative, once you've built that journey of who, there's more. Okay, there's the picture that you're going to use at the end, but actually there was these young people that worked on it and they were from Brixton Finishing School, and there was these people from these different backgrounds that inputted their life into the creative idea that they came up with. Most of the time they'll come back, they'll say, okay, I get it now. It has more than just, I can do this for cheaper, because she's just thinking in money at the moment.
Yeah, and just to build on as a very final point, because I know we're touching on some things that we will come back to as well later in the discussion, which is brilliant. But I sometimes call it like visual literacy. It's like not like, you know, when you see something, if someone hasn't got that visual literacy and understanding of like what the image is or how it will be perceived by others, or as Chris was saying, like what went into the making of that image, what makes an authentic image, all of these questions. I think that's where, as Leila was saying, like educating is super important, and explaining what like visual literacy is and how the integrity of the output is important and the quality of the output. Like you can't scale a DALL-E image properly, and there's always issues with, like, you know, they also don't think about that. They just see the image on this one size and think, yeah, it's fine. But so there's a whole bunch of things that I think get wrapped up in that conversation. But I think it's a really excellent point. So thank you for
a hard one too. Not easy.
Okay, so what I would like to do is take you through how the world sees, how AI sees the world, which is probably not going to be that surprising. It's quite a narrow lens. So, for example, AI imagines attractive people like this. You'll notice that they're predominantly white and predominantly female. AI imagines people who need support from social services as predominantly women, predominantly women of color. You'll see productive people represented as predominantly male, predominantly white. You'll see a person cleaning represented as predominantly female. You'll see people playing sports or a person playing football being, again, predominantly male. You'll see Muslim people depicted exclusively as men with beards and wearing head wraps. You'll see people who are neurodiverse represented predominantly white, predominantly female. You'll see an intellectual person, again, being represented predominantly male.
And all wearing glasses.
All wearing glasses. You're not intellectual if you're not wearing glasses. Just FYI. Yeah.
Intellectual. I'll take it. I'll take it.
100%. Yeah, mostly male, mostly white. How it depicts trans and non-binary people, again, mostly white, mostly more female presenting. How it depicts people with disabilities, all in wheelchairs. No other disability is reflected, you know. How it depicts people who would attend a panel about inclusive practices and representation in AI-generated content. That's you. So again, a very narrow lens that it's predominantly women and predominantly women of color. So, I mean, I think we know the answer to this question, but I feel like it's worth unpacking. Kalisha, why are these depictions potentially problematic?
Yeah, it's just reinforcing harmful stereotypes that have done damage in the couple centuries that have passed previously. I think it just proves that we don't really we haven't learned anything if we continue to go down these rabbit holes of how we represent people within society. I think, of course, it's not our fault what is inputted into these technologies in order for that to be the output in a way, because it's what's on the internet. But it's our duty and our responsibility to really fact check and to really question and challenge these images that are coming across in these AI platforms. I think if you don't do the work from a foundational level, from like a very basic D&I level, then when you go into this realm of AI, then it's nothing's going to change. A lot of brands aren't even there yet, and Layla will know when it comes to basic representation of cultures, identity, race, sexuality. So you kind of aren't surprised that these are the images that are depicted when you do type in those community groups. So I think it's learning from what we've got wrong in this century and understanding that if we continue to go down the path that we are, that we'll continue to reinforce these harmful stereotypes in this next phase of digital technology or AI, whatever you call it. I'm not that technical when it comes to these terms. But yeah, we're just going to repeat history, essentially, on a very basic level.
Yeah, all completely, I feel, accurate points. Earlier, there was a great panel where Laura Bombach, I think, mentioned that generative AI is churning out more shit to add to the shit that's already out there. And I quite like the simplicity of that statement. And also, I liked that it touched on the fact that, and she mentioned this directly after, people need to really craft prompts, rework it to get to the right type of output and to depict the right type of person. So I think the challenge I see there is that most people, or the layperson, isn't going to do that. They're just going to go to get the thing that they need, and they might not even realize, oh, actually, this isn't an authentic representation. I need to interrogate this more. I don't know what the panel think about this.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, it is a huge problem. And I think the fact that we're looking at these pictures right now and seeing, like, Jesus, like, in the future, like, with your kids and grandkids, you know, if they see this now, what are they going to see in the future? But I really think that the important thing is being, you know, in a team, like in a diverse team, really understanding like different perspectives in order to point out, and understanding even your own bias as well is as important. You know, we're learning every day as well. So surrounding yourself with people, which kind of makes me think as well, which is quite contradicting. Like, obviously, AI at the moment is cutting like a lot of jobs and so on, and maybe you need like fewer members of, you know, teams in order to create something and so on. But if there are less people doing the work, there's more bias, in my opinion. So yeah, I mean, it is a big problem. I think it's very important to just, have the right people around you in order for them to pick on, you know, certain issues and point them out and be like, no, this can't go out because, you know, of this type of perspective. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, it confuses me a little bit, because the whole point of generative AI is so that you stick in a prompt and then, you know, it gives you something that you may not have thought of, and that's why we let AI have a go, you know? If you're going to keep doing prompts to get to the picture I have in my head, then why are you using generative AI? Because you've decided what the output should be, so therefore go and take the picture of the white lady or the black man or whatever it is that you are, you know, because we're sort of saying, oh, it spat out these wrong pictures, so let's keep moving the command, changing the prompt until it gives me what I want. For me, it just maybe it's my simple mind, but it just that train of thought confuses me a little bit, because, you know, we're using it to say, okay, I don't have an answer for what the output should be. I'm going to let generative AI create something for me. It's not going to be creative, but it will create. So I'm letting it do it. But then if you're like, I know what the picture should be, and that isn't the right depiction of it, then go and take the right picture. I mean, the reason, you know, it's quite simple, some of the reasons why it's pumping out them pictures. The picture of the black female that should be sat in this audience, that's because whenever anybody puts on a diversity panel, the people taking pictures want to take pictures of the people that are diverse in there to make it look like it was a diverse audience at the diversity panel. And they won't show the banks of white people at the black diversity panel. They're going to show the one black person so that they can stick that out and say, oh, it was a very diverse event. So we've created that problem. We keep pumping out the one black woman in the back, taking a picture of her at every panel and sticking that out. Do you know what I mean? So it confuses me a bit.
Yeah, and I was going to say...
sorry. No, you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the nuance.
Yeah, there's an argument to suggest that some work just shouldn't be done through generative AI, personally. I think this is human work. I think anything that is around something that's so culturally nuanced and complex, I think humans should be doing the work. Personally, that's just my opinion on it. I think we haven't even scratched the surface of what we can do when it comes to ethnographic kind of research and cultural research. Like, people are only just building platforms now to scale cultural research, which is mind-boggling to me with the way that marketing is moving in the direction of community-driven marketing, etc. So I just think personally, that is going to do more harm than good when it comes to certain kinds of work, and it doesn't need to be the answer for everything.
Yeah, spot on. Yeah, far away.
I totally agree. I think the bigger picture is that it's a reflection of society. So we can call it generative AI, you can call it whatever. We have a big problem with this in humanity, right? This is why we're in the situation we're at the moment. This is why the output is how it is. This is why you need more diverse teams so they can check and challenge. This is why you need people with nuance, lived experience, because it's a human problem. And we struggled with it for 1,000 years. I'm from apartheid South Africa. Trust me, I know all about discrimination on color and race and background. So for me, this is a long-term thing. This is just an output of our big societal issue that we are struggling with even today with the Palestinian cause. So it's a big situation. The problem is you're getting it at a faster rate, more accelerated for people who don't have that thought at all, and it's then perpetuating even more harmful again. So the problem is the acceleration of this big societal human issue that we have at the moment, and this is a really much deeper issue. Totally. Which we're probably not going to solve in here. But we can try.
Right now. Yeah, we can give it a go.
We can try.
You know, we built a little thing on one of ours. So we've got like an insights company, and it's called Cultural Intelligence. And so if you go to like www.cultural-intelligence.co.uk, there's 2 chat boxes on there, and we've got ChatGPT on the left-hand side, and then we've hacked it and plugged the chat into just black media or just LGBT media. We've done about 12 different communities. And then when you type in a question, ChatGPT answers it, looking at exactly what you've just said, the biased, racist, misogynistic, homophobic world and what's on the internet. And, you know, and I'd even go a stage to say the internet is a little bit further than a true reflection of society. And the reason I'll say that is there's a lot of keyboard warriors.
Yes,
do you know what
true.
I mean?
Absolutely,
you know, like outside
right.
society is all of us now having this chat. We're going to agree, we're going to disagree, etc.
The non-vocal ones.
Yeah,
exactly.
You've got them ones that sit in their bed. I can only imagine. I've never been one, but I would be very stereotypical. But they're sitting in their bedroom. But when they leave the room, they would never. It's a little bit of a. For me, it's a Piers Morgan thing. Does it actually believe what's coming out of his mouth? You know, like, do they actually believe it, or are they just causing a little bit of stir because life's a bit boring on their keyboard in the bedroom? But ChatGPT is reading all your bedroom stuff as well as life, as well as editorial and social media and all of that. So anyway, so we wanted to prove this point to a client, and we built it, and now we've stuck it on so everybody can use it. You should have a play with it. Just ask a question, you know, ask a black-related question or an LGBT-related question, and just see the difference and the wild difference in the answers when it just read black media globally and answered your question, or read ChatGPT the whole world.
Yeah, there's been studies that show how LLMs can respond, or responded much more negatively when describing LGBT or black experiences, and that they did need training to try and unlearn that, which, you know, I guess is a metaphor for what, like, you know, anti-bias training that we do in work, etc. But you can see some of the stories on screen at the moment. Like, this has been something that's been observed, I think, in industry, and how potentially problematic or definitely problematic a lot of this stuff is. Far away, Leila.
It's really scary that Zuckerberg's new ethics team are all white men. Not ethics, but like, I think they're there for meta AI growth. But the actual people who are advising him, I mean, that says everything, and that's like last week.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think everyone should use Chris's comparison tool. I think that's great, actually.
Probably a better idea, for sure. But I think to return, Leila, to your previous point, you know, you mentioned about the way this kind of is something that's existed before, and then, you know, it's something that is a reflection of what's happened already, and I think that's very true. And I think that the risk and the fear, I guess, is that in a couple of years we're going to be seeing more and more and more content. 90% is what I think it was the Europol Innovation Lab projected. 90% of new online content will be AI generated. So what's scary about that to me is that all of these problematic depictions of underrepresented communities are just going to be proliferated, over and over. How do you stop that?
Well, I mean, the problem that we have now with so much investment by the big companies in AI is the regulations not at the same pace. So once we get to regulation, I believe politics impacts everything, and policies, right? So I think, unfortunately, this is what's going to happen. By the time the regulations come in, it's going to be really, really late. So I think that's where, I don't know how else you'd stop it unless there was a regulation around it that was a law issue, because that's what stops big businesses or holds them back. But then there's another big question around governments going, what about innovation? What about, you know, so there's a lot of that conversation happening, but I don't think you'll stop it unless it's against the law to be able to do that by big business, to be honest. I don't know how else to do it.
Yeah.
Just to give an alternative voice, what do we mean by stop it? Because
regulate it.
Regulate it.
Yeah, sorry, not stop it. Regulate it.
Yeah.
We'll make it safer as much as we can.
That's not bad if, I'm just voicing an opinion. It might not even be my own. But, no, it is. When I read this.
Copyright.
When I read this, it's like, that can look bad as a start. I was sort of, I don't know if you could hear me mumbling, but I was sort of reading it and mumbling a bit. I'm like, 9%. But that's if 100% more content is now being made. So actually, human-made content hasn't gone down at all. Not a single piece of content on the internet in 2026 is less than what we're doing now. But because everybody can make a whole lot more content, actually there's a lot more. So the pond got a lot wider, it turned into a lake. So I don't know if I'm articulating it correctly, but do you know what I mean? Like, we're not making any less content as humans, we're just making a whole load more content through AI as well. In which case, is it a problem?
But we don't know which is AI and which isn't. Potentially. So that's where maybe
at the moment, legs are AI, and the ones with 2 legs
but I think they're getting better, aren't they? They keep on saying this is getting better and better. At some point, you're like, you don't really know, and this is where there's another issue around the elections and deepfakes and all the rest of it. So the thing is that yes, there's maybe the same amount of content, but do we know the percentage that is human-made truly, you know, with care and with consideration, or is has AI somehow used positively or AI orientated to create a negative misinformation? We don't know. This is the difficulty.
But if it's not causing harm or anything, do we need to know? Do you need to know that was taken and that was AI? If the person that used it, the person that posted it there, is happy with it.
Well, if it's,
but
I
it's
think
disinformation and misinformation. That's the bit.
Yeah.
I feel like for entertainment purposes, maybe not.
Yeah.
I think that is a different kind of context to the one Layla is kind of alluding to, where I think authentic imagery is really important. And we have actually seen AI leveraged to create imagery of minority groups in support of certain political candidates, but that photo never happened.
Or Trump with all his black supporters.
Yeah, exactly. That was, I think, the one I was thinking of.
You could use that. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. So I think there are these examples where it is problematic because truth matters. But I think in entertainment,
truth.
yeah.
So if it's misrepresentation,
yeah, exactly.
That's
yeah,
what
but
we're
if it's
talking about.
just AI,
technology, no,
creative,
But it's
or
never the technology; it's how people use the technology.
Yeah,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like I think that's as always, where the problem lies. People are awful. That's the conclusion of this panel. So I think we've started to touch on this, but how do we think this might influence visual culture? I think Laura, you mentioned. About the future and like how this moment in time, I guess, when we spoke previously, might be reflected in the future in visual culture. Like when people look back at the 90% of additional content, is that what they think this time was like? I think there's like an interesting challenge there for us to consider. What do we think?
I think what we need to do is be careful within the outputs. I think going to Layla's point, first of all, is like we need to make sure it's more about the input and who's behind, all of this in order to create outputs that would influence culture in a positive way. And if we don't have the right people behind that within the input, and if we don't input the right actions into that, then, again, we go back to a cycle of misinterpretation and so on. So yeah, I think, I think we need to be cautious in terms of, who are we bringing into the table, and that's what I would say, really.
Cool. So we've talked a little bit about regulation potentially as something that could help with this. Are we thinking that images should be marked? We've heard about this in recent years, to prove they're authentic. Do we think there'll be, for example, a premium for human-made content because it has more craft in it? What are our thoughts?
So for me, the regulation is not only on the output. The regulation is thinking about how much AI could be used if it was created, maybe it's 10%, I don't know, whatever. Like, the regulations are not necessarily on just watermarking something on the output. The regulations is what you can and can't do to get to the output. Yeah. That, for me, is the important thing. But the regulation also needs to come around millions of other things, climate change, all the things, right, that we're in at the moment. So it's not so black and white. It isn't like that's the regulation that's going to change and make it better. And we need to clean the internet. So it's regulation around data and data ethics and data cleaning. It's all that kind of stuff that's business orientated, that's anywhere where there's data pools. What are the regulations around that? Where the data is being pulled from for the output of AI. So I think it goes beyond a watermark and just saying, is this copyrighted or not? It's the input. I talk about that for my whole life. Yeah. Anything that you want to do, whether it's culture work, whether it's whatever, it's the input. The output's the easy bit. Yeah. So the regulation for me sits there. And big businesses will get away with shit if they're not going to get, go to jail for it. And sometimes they do it anyway. So I think that's where we're going to find the changes. Sorry, please, you go ahead.
I don't apologize at all. You're talking gems. No, I think it's hard because the responsibility is always put on the end users.
Yes.
It reminds me of sustainability.
Exactly.
It's actually the big corps.
It is.
Who have to lead this, and they're always left alone to do whatever they want. And then when things go to shit, excuse my French, that's when we all as a society have to then have conversations like this on how we're going to clean it up. So I think the responsibility should be on these big tech companies who are generating these technologies to do it ethically and to do it in a way where they are being checked about their biases, and they need to ensure that they have got diverse minds in these rooms, because otherwise, I'm just going to repeat everything we've said on this panel, the problem will repeat itself. So I think the policies need to be put in place, and these people really need to be checked from now as they're building out these technologies, as they're integrating them into businesses, because otherwise it will get to a place where, like you say, in the industry is outpacing policy and just humanity in itself. That's why it's a bit scary, like you said, because we can't keep up with this at this point. Like, you put something in ChatGPT, that thing's coming out in 10 seconds, if that. And it's like, how are we going to compete with that as a society? So I think, the responsibility needs to be put on the big players.
I think I'd add to that I think we've got to remember, like, since we were cutting our finger and writing on walls in caves, we've used imagery to archive history. You know, we use it to know what went on before us, and we're going to be, people in the future, like we said, are going to use it to archive what happened today.
Terrifying.
You know, yesterday, and great pictures of England winning, and hopefully on Sunday, even more imagery of them winning.
Historical images.
But you know what I mean. I'm being a bit silly, but we've been using imagery to archive history, so we're going to have to come up with a way, and you've sort of all touched on it, we're going to have to come up with a way of saying what was real imagery of today, of this time, of these events, because there's a lot of them going on right now, or what is not, what was generated by the mind of artificial, or by an artificial mind, sorry. So whatever we're going to do, that regulation, and I know there's 1,001 things that need to be regulated before that, but that regulation we're going to need to get a shift on, because when you only need 2 sort of years before you've lost a whole load of archive, of imagery archive to tell us about, the things that happen. So,
Kalisha?
Yeah, no, I was talking to Kevin about this before, about as marketeers or people who work in media, publications, culture, etc. We never think of ourselves as people who are archiving history. And if you make a campaign, you're depicting a certain time, a period, a culture, a people, representing a certain community at that specific time. So when people look back at 2024, they'll look at the ad campaigns, they'll look at the music videos, they'll look at the movies as references in time. And so what we do, it may not feel that powerful or that big, but we actually play a huge role in history. So I think when you are tapping into these devices, you're not always going to think about it, but sometimes just think about the role you're playing and how people look back at the time we're in now. And that's how I think about AI and the use of it, and how to protect the work that we're doing, because what we're doing is important work. It may not feel like it at times. It may feel like you're getting people to buy more stuff that they don't need, or you're just giving into capitalism, for example. But there are elements to that are bigger than I'm not even going to get into it. But working in fashion, things come around all the time, and there's an element of nostalgia that people really connect to and care about, and it brings back memories and it brings back certain times in their life. So you are really shaping people's memories when you work in these fields.
I think that's great, actually, and it's something that I talk about, and I have for 30 years. I'll keep on saying it. This idea of brands and businesses and these kind of things that really impact the world, positively or negatively. They can really change a narrative. They can really break a stereotype, And this is really important work, but I love what you're saying about that being archival. I think about very much the present, but I love that, actually, because it's the looking back, because we look back now, we go, oh, what's the references for whatever? And you're like, oh my God, it's whatever, but that's what they'll be doing. Probably next year, because they'll be able to, because they're so far ahead of us anyway. But I love that idea of that being archival. And that's why it's really important to make sure you're educating and getting the best output, because your grandkids are going to be looking at that and going, oh, that's what granddad did, that really weird picture. Maybe think about it that way, or whatever you want to do,
It reminds me of, I had a conversation recently with the creative director at National Geographic, and I was telling them that I'm doing this panel, and that we're going to be having these conversations about how AI is affecting, I guess, visual culture and how we're depicting communities. And he said, that it is the antithesis of their business, which of course it is. Like National Geographic would never depict communities, cultures, people. It aligns with their brand, and I think that's an interesting thing to consider with this group. How are brands reacting to some of these kind of challenges? And I have an example here, which some of you might have seen already. I actually think it was in another talk earlier as I walked by. I was like, oh, I have that video. But we'll play it and you guys can see how one brand has responded to this challenge.
Come with me and you'll be in a world of pure imagination. Take a look and you'll see into your imagination. Simply look around and view it. Anything you want to do it. Wanna change the world, there's nothing to it.
So what do we think?
Can I just?
It's Chris's mechanic, right?
No, I've got
just
something to
saying.
say on this one though.
Far away.
All right,
Point.
so yeah, that's fine. That's fine. That's what I'll say about that one. But it was only a couple of years ago where they had an advert where the black woman washed herself and became white. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I
Dove
remember.
ad?
I remember.
Do you know what I mean? So like,
Yeah.
like who's perpetuating bad stereotypes? The same company. It was literally like 2 years ago, was it? Or maybe 3 years ago? I know because I was judging DNADs and we slated it. But like, she literally, do you remember she washed her face and she put her face down and she was a black woman and she came back up and she was white? And that was the ad for Dove. So, I mean,
got
like,
new
you gotta do a
agents.
bit more than that before you start telling us about perpetuating bad beauty
Yeah.
and stuff.
Go on, Chris.
No offense, Unilever. Sorry.
No, it's really, I think it's a very valid response. I'll come to Laura first.
Yeah, I think ultimately it begins with us, as I said, and like the way we consume things. And at the end of the day, the more things that, like, if you live stuff, if you live experiences, you know, that's when you're gonna get, you know, or not be as biased or so on. But I really think that, you know, even though that happened with Dove, at least right now they're at this point and like educating the, you know, the next generation of, you know, how we can look at beauty overall. But yeah, I completely get your point. It's just like now we're in the present moment, and at least they're not continuing making the same.
I'll give them that. I just, if any other brand had been on that, I would have had a different emotion than watching that. And I'm like, whoa.
I think it's difficult for us because we see the back end of shit, right? So this is always going to be hard. But to, you know, I get your point completely. I'm a bit like you. So, but I also get your point. But for me, it's for that young girl sitting in her bedroom who doesn't have that knowledge. That's the impact.
Exactly.
But you got to also realize that that blonde person has been that stereotype for my entire lifetime, and I'm 50 years old, and before that. So it's not new that that is the stereotype.
Totally. Yeah.
But I'm glad that they're doing something about it, but this is not new news for anyone who hasn't been that stereotype. That's the humanity piece I'm talking about, the human piece.
Are they doing anything about it, or
I
did
don't
they
know.
just say we're not
Of
going to get
course.
involved?
Well, this is always the depth bit that comes after
they
it.
could
I get it.
spend $1 million on making loads of pictures and sticking them on the internet. So AI starts to train itself differently.
Yeah.
That was
Maybe they're doing it.
You've got a pitch right there.
Yeah. You're ready to go. No, I think that cynicism is completely fair, and I agree with the two lenses that have kind of been discussed. But I think it is an interesting one to unpack and think about how brands can respond or will respond
Brands have a responsibility and obligation to respond to what's
100%.
happening in the world, whether it's Gen AI, whether it's advertising, whether it's media, whatever. This is an ongoing story. This is one new tool. But unfortunately, it's also used by the public.
Definitely. And
That's
I think
the thing.
what we've been touching on is that there are different actors here. So we have corporations that have a responsibility. There's government, which we've discussed around regulation. And then there's the individual and like how they're using these tools. So that seems to be like 3 areas.
And then there's advertising in between.
Yeah, and then there's advertising in between.
They're the one who's making the things.
Yeah, 100%. Excellent. Okay, so I think to kind of unpick this in a little bit more detail, why do we think Gen AI struggles with depicting some underrepresented people and communities? Like, just look at this image of a para-athlete with prosthetic limbs. I'm pretty sure that's a wheel or some sort of scooter at the bottom. Obviously, it's something that AI struggles with. Like, why do we think that is?
I think it's all the reasons we've already said, right?
Yeah.
The
What does the
input
audience-
is-
Scraping from
Scraping.
where the problem is.
Yeah, but we know that there's images of people with prosthetic limbs, and we know there's many images of para-athletes. So do we think it's just that the AI isn't sophisticated enough to distinguish between what a para-athlete
right?
is?
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I think it's the opposite. We got to remember, we're not, because we do get confused between algorithms and AI, because they're not the same thing. And we've been using algorithms in the creative industry for a long time. You know, things like Adobe has loads of algorithms that fixes steady images and, you know, stuff like that, or takes the bad noise out of sound and all of the stuff. AI, it's artificial intelligence, i.e. it is a sort of circle algorithm that keeps training itself. So it's not that it's not clever enough, it's that it's being artificially too clever. Like, that guy could move fast. He's got wheels on the end of his legs. He'll move.
Yeah, but on one.
But the way they've done it is probably one to push the wheel on one. I don't know, but it's artificial intelligence. It's took a load of noughts and ones, and I can say noughts here. A quick one.
As opposed to zeros.
Well, yeah, in
zeros.
the US, so I was on an AI panel with the boss of bloody JP Morgan and our mayor, right? The biggest panel I've ever been on. No. This is the biggest panel.
Yeah,
the second biggest panel, right? And I said noughts and ones to the room, and the whole room went blank. It was in New York at JP Morgan's head office. Whole room went, I didn't know they didn't know what a nought was. Like, it's not even a word. They call noughts and crosses tic-tac-toe. Anyway, sorry, back on. So AI, like, I think it's doing what it was actually built to do. It was to go beyond our scope of thinking and to, you know, to pull in 1 trillion data points at once and come back with an answer. It's not answering it like a human. Why would it? That's not its job. It was never built to do that. If you want a picture of a person that's wearing the prosthetic limbs that we have in today, take the bloody picture. Like, it's coming up. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's doing its job. It's artificial. It's forward thinking. It's thinking of every history and every future and every movie and every book that we've ever written. You know, remember watching movies. The movie was called 2000. We should all be in shell suits on hoverboards right now.
I know a few people like that.
I know people in shell suits. I'm from Manchester. But do you know what I mean? So, like, it's a great question, because, like, I look at it and I'm sort of like, okay, that's the kind of picture I want my AI to build me. Then I'll bring it back down to human.
But I think you make a really, really good point here. It is the definitions of things, right? And what they're used for, like large language models, AI, these are all actually quite different things and can be used in different ways, and should be. But I think everyone has just gone, AI, huge catch-all term for anything that feels techie and new, basically, right? So I think there's a big job to be done in actually defining and understanding not only what these things mean, but the uses for different things and their different uses to this point. So I think There's another little job for you, Chris, for add another new business to your, just called, diction.com or whatever for
You have
AI.
a lot of to-dos after this.
Yeah.
I'd open to the audience. Are there any thoughts on this? Yeah, gentleman at the back. Yeah.
I think it's a good question, and I think there's multiple answers to that question. One is, yes, the data is out there, so what do we need to do to make sure it's as clean as possible? That is a job to be done, right? And then, because the data is out there, we also need these regulations to understand how it can be used, because I feel like it's going to be hard to just go, the data's out there, so what are we supposed to do about it? And I don't think anyone knows, to be honest. I think we're all like, fucking hell, we need to do something about this. But I think there's multiple answers to it. But I think we have to all start with going, how do we make sure that the data that AI is pulling from, whether it be within walled gardens, whether it be public, whether it be within Meta, whether it's in Nike, all the data needs to at least be as clean as possible in order to do that. I don't know how we clean up the data on the internet, to be honest. I don't know. Society, yes. And that's what I'm saying. It's an output of what the bigger situation is. Absolutely.
I'd say,
I don't know.
We know the answer. I think you know the answer. The answer is we need to fucking fix society.
Yes.
Like, that's the answer.
Let's go.
We know it. We just know it's too big a problem right now. Yeah, we are.
No, it's not.
AI.
It's society, 100%.
It's our thousands of years of hate and greed that made that image. AI just told us
what we think.
The data that we gave it. So we need to spend 100 years fixing. Oh shit! And then maybe the picture will be better.
Different. But I think businesses can do that.
Of course.
They can do it because they have their data pools. And they have to take that responsibility and obligation.
Well, I think it's every human on Earth's responsibility.
It is. You're right. You're absolutely right.
In all honesty,
absolutely. No, you're
it's us
absolutely
up
right.
here. It's
you're
you
absolutely
down
right.
there.
Exactly. So if you look at sort of promptable brands coming in, right? So you're going to have these amazing AI assistants from whatever brand, and within that's a new retail situation, right? So you have Nike, and I'm going, I play tennis. And they'll go, here's a shoe for you, and here is your local tennis club, and the weather is this, and the blah. All through my assistant, but the information that Nike needs to give back to me will be their data. It's not from the public data. So I think there's a difference between public data and society, and then what big brands and businesses who will become promptable brands need to do immediately for that, because then, maybe that's a way to do it. As I said, flying the plane as we're building the fucking thing, and trying to figure it out as we go along. But yeah. We have to keep on asking questions, though.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. Yeah, they can see it. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It's the future, and they've got to do it. Read my book next year. Yeah. It's a challenge. Yeah. It is, but you need the diverse teams to be able to do that well. So you still need, I think there is a job for human AI collaboration, right? But you definitely can't, I think you need that team that's diverse to be able to, in the first place, do it.
I feel like the one that calls out everyone. The reason, though, that they're having to do that is because Getty only paid for images of white people. Getty only paid for images of this.
Society.
So because everybody sent in their images, but all, and I mean no offense to this, but all of the well-known white photographers that took pictures of middle-class people because that's where they were from and blah, blah, blah. That was the pictures that Getty paid for. They didn't pay for the young black artist from Peckham or Manchester or whatever. So they perpetuated, they're fixing their own problem. They've now got loads of images that don't really reflect society because they didn't really take on them images. And now they're having to build a team and they're doing a great job of it. They actually are doing a great job of it, but they're having to build a team to send them out to go and take pictures of the other half of society.
Let them do it and let them pay for it. That's what I'm trying to say about obligation and responsibility. Do the thing and change the thing,
Yeah,
wow,
we're
that
all
went
good.
fast.
We're all good. Yeah, we're whizzing through.
The most unsubtle.
I was like, are you...
I saw it from way over here too. But it's good.
Yeah, exactly.
It's good. Okay, we have 10 minutes left, so there's a couple of things I want to touch on. One builds on what we've just been speaking about, and it is an example of a brand trying, I guess, to do the right thing. So Levi's announced it would use AI-generated models to showcase more diverse body types and skin tones, aiming to create a more inclusive shopping experience. But the decision, which was made in partnership with LaLaLand.ai, faced backlash for not hiring real diverse models, which critics labeled as lazy and problematic. I think this is speaking to some of the things you guys have just been talking about. Levi's then clarified that AI models are not a substitute for real diversity efforts and that they will continue using live models. The company stressed the technology's potential to offer a personalized shopping experience without undermining their commitment to diversity. So I had a little bit of backtracking there, I think, on what they were hoping would be like a great moment, but I think it speaks to the underlying issues. Why are you not hiring more diverse models, or giving opportunities to people from underrepresented communities so that they have the advantage, and can move forward? So I think that it's touching on some of these themes that we've kind of just talked about. But in the spirit of keeping to time somewhat, I want to ask you guys what you think we need to do as creatives in industry to avoid kind of some of these pitfalls. How can we address the misrepresentation of our communities? What are your thoughts? I'll come to you first, Kalisha.
Sorry, I'm just reading the question again. I think it's about making sure that it's like what you said earlier, using AI to create, but it's not a creative. Creatives need to understand that it's their mind, it's their human touch, it's their soul that creates the best work, and that AI should just be a tool of inspiration, something to support their work. That's my very simple answer to that. Personally, I think, thanks. I think we like to overcomplicate things sometimes when it comes to these. It's like when Meta first came out, everyone was going crazy about it. I think we're in that same phase when it comes to AI. There's a lot of uncertainty around it and a lot of ambiguity, and because of that, I think we've made it this thing in our head that's so hard to kind of digest. But I think on a very basic level, in order for us to not repeat the mistakes we've made before, is we need to be better at understanding different cultures, different people, and how we represent them in our work, checking our bias, ensuring that we're checking our work and getting multiple voices in there. It's quite basic stuff, I feel like we talk about this all the time within D&I rooms, but it's the same process. It's just making sure you check the biases. You're making sure that if you're doing a piece of work about a community, get that community in the room,
100%.
Making sure you're doing their research, pay them to do that research.
100%.
Don't just offer them a free voucher for something or something like that, because people like to do that. And people do that.
Depends on the voucher.
Right,
Joking.
And you have to understand, a lot of this research can be built into long-term strategy. I think the most important thing about inclusive marketing and D&I, it shouldn't be a short-term strategy. It should be something that should be embedded into work across 5 or 10 years. I think just keep some of the work human.
Yeah.
And it's an exploratory phase, I think, for now with AI. I don't think it's something that we should be putting all our eggs into one basket for. But yeah.
100%. Brilliant answer. I think, it's that was a
Too
warning
late,
for you.
Chris.
Warning. Did I thought you were going to jump in there.
No, I can't. For me, it just piggybacks off what you said, and it's just don't stop creating. That's the answer. What should we do as creatives? Keep being creatives. AI is not here to be a creative, even if people want to think it is, you know, it's never going to be a creative. So let's just keep creating, let's keep doing good work, let's keep sticking it out there. If people, you know, like myself, want to use AI for some stuff, if nobody wants to go near it, you know, it's not going to take over the world. You know, I would be more worried about the satellite system that the British Army uses.
I was going to say, please don't bring any of the army stuff, because you
Well,
know things we don't know. We don't want to know that we're going to be taken over.
The British Army.
We're good with the creative.
Satellite system's called Skynet. And
Terrifying.
they just launched Skynet 11, which is the one in Terminator that takes over. So if you're going to be worried about anything, don't be worried about DALL-E and ChatGPT.
Well, that's a terrifying conclusion.
Yeah.
I was going to ask if
Whistleblower.
I was going to ask in our last, we have 5 minutes left, so I think it would be great to hear any further questions. Yeah, go ahead, Phil.
I wonder if there's too much reliance, when you guys talk about the sort of the reality of what we try to use AI to depict. There's too much reliance on it to depict reality versus using it for the imaginative side of things. Because I think as a creative, the way it's been very useful is rather than sitting all night on Photoshop trying to get a monkey in a convertible smoking a cigarette while drinking a Kool-Aid.
I like your briefs.
Instead of doing that on Photoshop, I can prompt that and get it done in 5 minutes or less. But to ask it, show me a Muslim in Egypt, for instance, it'll give me reality versus, as you said, get the picture, go out and get the actual picture.
Yeah.
So I think, I don't know what you guys think, but I feel like there should be a use for it as a tool to enhance your creativity versus go give me reality, which already exists.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, you know, and in case anyone didn't hear, just to kind of summarize it, it's about like using AI to show like more imagined scenarios or more creative scenarios, and then if it's actually like a person or something real, like actually going out and getting that work, right? And I think what's interesting is I know that some of the biggest advertising production organizations, companies made up of thousands and thousands of people in agencies, they're using AI tools right now to depict real scenarios, you know, and they're integrating it and spending a lot of money on it. Now, whether or not that pays off, like I still think there's a question mark there about the efficacy of this technology, but I think there is, it's kind of almost like running away from us, I think, in some of those contexts where I don't think there is that distinction for a lot of creative agencies where they just see we could create everything with AI, but I think it's a really good point. I don't know if anyone else has a response on the panel.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with what you say. I think like it goes back to the point on productivity versus creative. Again, it's what you say as well about like taking 5 minutes in order to prompt that, right? That might have probably taken you, I don't know, a couple days to do. Versus, you know, the creative actual output and concept and what goes around that. To this point, how can we address the misinterpretation of art communities? Just go live experiences, like, you know, just get out there and, you know, look at what you consume and how you consume it overall. I think, in my perspective, like, you know, traveling, knowing communities, you know, within the music industry, go and see musicians play certain genres, you know. That's how I learn more and more, and I think, you know, that's how you could get closer to what you want to portray into these technologies and devices. Yeah,
makes total sense, especially that piece about going and actually seeing, you know, musicians, local musicians, and like authentic musicians.
Yeah, exactly.
But also work with them.
Yeah, 100%, and pay them.
So,
pay them.
I mean, I don't even talk about pay anymore. That's offensive, if that's even a conversation to be had. But it's this idea of, if you want to talk about any community, work with the people from the community. It's not that hard, and it's something. I mean, I've always done. So for me, it just feels strange that it's still a question of how you would get not, you know, misrepresentation in any community culture, be it music, be it fashion, be it sneakers, whatever. Work with the people who shape that community
100%.
and represent that community. That's it.
Our
Done.
creative agency has a tagline, nothing about us without us.
Yeah, of course.
none
So
about
they-
us without us. I love that, and I might steal that, but I'll credit you.
It's copyrighted.
It's brilliant. No, it's so good. It's copyrighted. Okay, good to know. But really, really interesting points. I think we had one other question, if you still have it.
Yeah, it's kind of a two-part.
Fire away.
Sorry. So one is regulation. What kind of regulation do you think would make any effect? And how is it ever going to be effective? Because it has to be global and national.
Data, cleanliness, and ethics for big businesses.
Comes on to my second.
Yeah.
But like, I can imagine something like you might get something through in the US or Europe, then China probably won't play a role, and like you get to a point with like generative content being like all of whatever Spotify becomes, whatever Netflix becomes, most of the media you consume being AI generated, your boutique human-made content being still something you seek out for a special occasion.
Yeah.
But then like, and that's going to probably be a lot, and you can stop most people, but then you're still going to have some actors that are going to carry on. So I find that tricky thing.
Yeah.
And then coming to the point of data cleanliness, like Project Nightshade and all this was like sullying images so they can't be stolen from an artist point of view. It's only going to make the data less clean from an AI point of view. So how do you see, what do you think about that? Because you've got the artists goal and then you've got clean data and the two things don't go.
So for me, I work with big brands and brands, so that's the area of my expertise. I don't have the answers for everything, but from what I could see from the area that I work in and have been working for a long time, that's my focus. I think you could probably speak to someone from media who could tell you something from there. I don't think it's one thing is going to be for everything. I think there's multiple layers of regulation, but from a business point of view, it's absolutely their responsibility and obligation to be able to do that with their own data. Okay, so that's own data, and then how businesses use their own data internally for productivity, enhancement, whatever, because the output comes from that for that brand. So that's my area of expertise. I'm not sure about the rest of the world, but that's the area that I'm looking into at the moment.
Yeah, and I feel like whatever the solution is that emerges, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of discourse about this over the next months and years, I feel like it won't be one thing, it'll be many things, and it'll have to be a concerted effort.
But big businesses and government are very, very closely linked together.
Yeah.
So it's that collaboration is the thing, bit like climate, bit like diversity, whatever. It's the big players who are going to make the difference for us all, because we're impacted by policy and law, unfortunately. But that's just how it is. But yes, it's not easy, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Ladies and gents, sorry to interrupt.
Yes,
We're going to have to leave it there. We've run way over time. But thank you so much to everybody on stage. Let's give them a round of applause.